all Dominicans at home and abroad on our agriculture, our economy, our foreign relations, our justice system, our governance, our international competitiveness, our education, our world class festivals and entertainment, sports, politics, regional cooperation, and much more. Globally positioning Dominica within the Caribbean. Join the conversation on the Global View on Q. Tune in, call us, have your say. The Global View on Q, only on Q95, the big station. The Global View on Q, the big station. Insights into where the people of Dominica and the Caribbean.
Good
Good
evening
evening.
to you on the radio and on the internet at home and abroad. Thank you for choosing Q95. This is the Global View on Q. A very warm welcome to all of our Q family listeners at home and globally. I'm Sheridan Gregoire, Mr. G. It's Tuesday, 1st April 2025, the 13th Tuesday of 2025, and it's just about 8:02 p.m. in the studios at Q95, the big station. We're live on our radio frequencies on QTV, on Facebook, and on YouTube. Please follow us at Q95 FM Radio. Share the live, like our pages, or on your phone numbers or on the homepage of our website at www.q95da.com. Get the latest breaking news and reviews on Q95 because you know it's true if you hear it on Q. We continue to revive the spirit of graciousness, love, peace, prosperity, and unity among our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. It is our 13th Global View on Q show for 2025, and we continue to engage with our local, regional, and global Q family listeners and friends of Dominica at home and abroad. The topic tonight is the shortcomings of the electoral bills passed in Parliament, the unlawful arrest and charging of peaceful protesters under an outdated law, the oppressive bail conditions imposed on those arrested, and the continued attacks on the peaceful community of Salisbury. My co-host is Justice Dr. Irving Andre, and our panel tonight includes Attorney Earl Williams, Attorney Ronald Charles. They will share their knowledge on the key essentials of electoral reform, electoral bills passed in Parliament, with a view to persuading Dominicans from all walks of life to continue the struggle for best practice electoral laws, including campaign finance laws and regulations. We will examine the flaws in the 15-month reconfirmation process contained in the new law, which has loopholes to allow the Prime Minister to call an election within that 15-month period using the existing tainted, bloated electoral list. All signs indicate that another tainted general elections appear to be imminent, but elections have consequences in any modern democracy, good or bad consequences. So it is well worth repeating that we have witnessed the results of tainted elections in Dominica over the past several election cycles and their impacts and consequences like corruption, like crime and bribery and cheating, the loss of manufacturing and processing jobs, the loss of agriculture and agribusiness exports, healthcare problems, the brain drain, out-migration, political victimization and persecution, environmental degradation, poor sanitation and non-collection of garbage, selective dispensation of justice, persistent persecution of opponents of the ruling regime, a high cost of living and little salary increases for public officers, while cabinet ministers get 20 and 30% increases, reduced tourism visitor arrivals and revenues, a failing economy, and a despotic governance. The 2019 and 2025 brutal Salisbury attacks, unaccounted CBI revenue, just to name a few among many other failures. So the question is tonight, where do we go from here, Dominica? What are the justifications for the charges springing from March 19? Who should be held to account for what happened? Should the police be held to account for the violence? Should those who defame be held to account? Can a class action suit be brought against anyone or entity? Can anything be done about the onerous bail conditions imposed on some persons? Where do we go from here? We will attempt to answer these questions tonight. But most right thinking Dominicans are of the view that it is high time to bring an end to this era of total power in the hands of one man who accumulates massive personal wealth, while the people and public officers struggle to survive and pay a very heavy price for the self serving, lavish lifestyles of the political directorate, who may solely want to remain in power to take more for themselves. But history has taught us a very important lesson, and that is that every dictator has an expiry date. So I look forward to the suggestions of our panel, our listeners and callers and viewers on Facebook and YouTube on what needs to be done to move beyond this era of stagnation and through a fair general election on a level playing field, put true patriots in office who will work to make the people's lives better instead of focusing on just grabbing more and more for themselves. Enough is enough, really. We have been under this one regime for 25 years, but the people have very little personal progress to show. Our youth continue to be sidelined and left behind. Our economy is continuing to slide down a very slippery slope. Dominicans must repair the reputational damage done to their country, reverse the assault on the consolidated fund, and bring their money back home to boost the prosperity of the Dominican people. Give the people hope again and rebuild the once thriving, dynamic middle class and all of the small business subsectors. My co host tonight, Dr. Justice Dr. Andre, Attorney Earl Williams, and Attorney Ronald Charles, will all share the ideas and recommendations on my talking points as well as on their own talking points and more, with a view to moving forward on a path through proper electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations and free and fair democratic elections, real independence, real growth, and generational wealth. After 25 years, isn't it a high time to put a new dynamic law abiding group of people in government as soon as possible to implement a progressive, people driven, growth oriented, tangible action plan for the benefit of all Dominicans at home and abroad? So, as usual, we invite you, our Q family and friends of Dominica, to help give us our usual huge shout out, hugs and love and appreciation, and a big thank you to our farmers, to our healthcare providers, to our frontline workers, to police and fire officers, teachers, doctors, nurses, public and private sector patriots, and friends of Dominica at home and abroad. As I always say, we welcome each and every Dominican and friend of Dominica to the Global View on Q. We embrace you wherever you are tonight, in every nook and cranny, in every village, in every community at home in Dominica, in the region, and globally. Thank you again tonight, Sherwin, for keeping us on the air. And a big up Lambi on the console directing the traffic. We will take your calls. As you know, the people's voice is always a priority on Q and on the Global View on Q. So call us anytime during the program tonight. Lambi will signal us when you call. My co-host and panelists will expand and deliver on their own ideas. So I go first to Justice Dr. Irving Andre for his opening remarks and to get the ball rolling tonight. Dr. Andre, over to you. Your mic is muted.
Yes, good evening to the audience. Good evening to
How are
the
you doing?
panelists, Lambi, Sherwin, Mr. G, and all those persons who unfortunately have been made to pay some price for simply exercising their democratic rights as enshrined under Section 1, subsection B of the Constitution to assembly and to associate in a fashion that is peaceful. Let me probably just say a few words about the charge and the act under which, 21, what's the number? I don't know. 21, 22 persons have been charged. It's called the Riot Act. This act, the Riot Act, was first enacted in the United Kingdom, not in 1890s, as some of our friends have said, but as early as 1714. 1714, over 500 years old. Why was it enacted? Because this tells us something about what is happening in Dominica today. This act was enacted because in 1710, 1714, and then in 1715, there were violent riots in England. Riots which cost the lives of many hundreds of persons, which resulted in the destruction of property, which involved thousands of persons seeking some type of redress during an era where there was no such thing as a constitution. Britain, even today, does not have a constitution. And what the act essentially said, because it is almost the same as what our act is saying. It says something to the effect that it allowed local officials, after reading a proclamation and ordering illegally assembled groups of more than 12 to disperse. And if those folk failed to disperse within a certain time period, those who did so would be liable or guilty of what they call a felony offense, which is an indictable offense, of rioting, essentially. Now, the act has three words, which is somewhat significant. It talks about riotous, tumultuous, and unlawful assembly. Now, in this case, all the evidence suggests, despite the false narratives you might hear from police sources, that any disturbance occurred after the police responded to the shaking of the barriers in the vicinity of Fort Young Hotel. Can that be construed as riotous or tumultuous or being unlawful? No, simply no. Why do I say so? Because there's a number of countries that have similar legislation where these issues have been litigated. I can tell you one Court of Appeal case in Canada, which I'm very familiar with, clearly indicates that the word tumultuous means something more than boisterous, noisy, or disorderly conduct. It means violence, some violence or terrorizing of the public in such a manner that, in fact, it induces fear. And let me pose the question. Before the police upped the ante and acted in a very disorderly and riotous fashion, was there any behavior that could be construed as riotous, tumultuous, or unlawful? The simple answer is no. The fact of the matter is the police were intent on disrupting a peaceful assembly of people because permission had not been granted, because they felt that permission had to be granted for a citizen of Dominica to exercise his or her right under Section 1, subsection B, I believe, of the Dominica Constitution. That is a perversion of the Constitution. It is a bastardization of the Constitution. Let us pause and ask ourselves for 1 minute. Where is the evidence of that riotous, tumultuous assembly before the police started firing tear gas and rubber bullets? Let me ask you this. Did you see any broken bottles or glass on the street? Did you see any stones fired by persons at the Fortune Hotel? Did you see any sticks? Did you see anyone with anything in his or her pockets which could be construed as a weapon? Now, somebody told me, I wasn't there, that somebody did find a packet of chiclet on the ground, on the street, where this unfolded. There was absolutely not a scintilla of evidence that anyone was engaged in riotous and tumultuous conduct. So, this is a concoction by the law authorities to ensure that there is no legitimate dissent in Dominica, a perversion of the Constitution. But then again, what if the rioters had said, no law, no constitution shall stop us? What would they call it? What if the rioters had said, there will be blood on the streets if any act is passed in Parliament? How would these very same police officers have reacted? What if the rioters have said, any labor person we see, we will throw hot water on them? How would these so-called policemen have reacted? This is a perversion of the rule of law. This is a blatant and flagrant violation. It flies in the face of all kinds of cases, with some of which I can share with you, as to whether the police were justified in what they're doing. I've already indicated to you the legal definition of tumultus. Mere disorder or disruptiveness does not constitute such behavior. Furthermore, some courts have said, look, mere presence can result in someone involved in an unlawful assembly being found guilty. But there is such a thing as a criminal law, requirements of proof with respect to a criminal law. You need an act and you need the mental element to commit an act. So how can mere presence constitute an offense without proof that there was any intention to commit an unlawful act or to be involved in an unlawful assembly? It makes absolutely no sense from a legal perspective. It only makes sense in the perverted views of the political directorate who provided the instructions to act in the fashion that they did. And the courts will have to decide what, in fact, is the law. You need to have an intention to commit a certain type of offense for you to be found guilty of an offense. And the law, the cases I'm familiar with, says that quite frankly. It indicates, and I'll just read from a case that I have before me, liability should not flow from mere presence at a place where a crime is being committed by others. You understand that? Mere presence does not a criminal offense make. Many persons who were picked up and forced to spend a night in jail, even those who had to use their shoes as a pillow, there is no offense, no act which could be construed as a criminal offense. This is the iron hand of retribution being levied against persons who are exercising their rights. No one can point out to any utterances made by the so-called leaders of this peaceful assembly that they're going to loot and burn. One person, and I hope the lawyers have listened, because he should not be allowed to get away with it, accused certain persons of wanting to murder people in the parliament. You see, this is not a trial of those who've been arrested. This is a trial of Dominica. Dominica is on trial. Our legal system is on trial. And our lawyers are on trial. And it warms my heart that many lawyers, civic-minded lawyers, have taken the fight and have provided human service to those who have been identified as being there and charged because they want to send a message. And you know why the heavy hand of state retribution is coming down? Because they have lost. They have lost 2 or 3 significant cases in recent weeks. And they feel that they have to go after it again. They have lost the bogus incitement charges. They have lost the action to strike out, the action with respect to the proceeds of passports which have been frittered and hidden, according to someone involved in the sale of passports, in mysterious accounts all over. And that is why we have so many buildings and hotels springing forth in Roseau and in various parts of Dominica, because we know where the source of those funds are. That is why in that legislation enacted, there is not a single mention of campaign finance reform, because the political directorate wants to continue what they've been doing illegally, but they now want to do it legally. This is why we have confirmation as opposed to re-registration. Because Mr. G, if you've been living in kind of a 25 years and your name is on the list, they want you to come and confirm. Come and confirm so you can continue to do. Well, you haven't been voting, but those involved, those who've been paid to come to vote. Hillsbury laws of England state unequivocally that the payment of the transportation of persons for an express or implied reason to come to Dominica to vote for that person, or even to refrain, is a criminal act. And that is why it is not mentioned in this new legislation, because these folk want to do exactly what they've been doing. In other words, they want to make robbery an everyday activity. They want to decriminalize robbery in terms of elections. And I can indicate to you, and I take solace from that, those regional journalists who've interviewed certain persons, when they hear what is happening in Dominica, they shake their heads in disgust. No amount of lipstick on a pig can change the pig from being a pig. And that is where we are today. Dominica is on trial. The 12 persons have been asked to pay a price, not because they've done anything wrong, because they have stood in the way of the bastardization of Dominica's electoral process. Because they have said that democracy means something. Now, what if these protesters had said that we do not need an opposition? What if one of these persons was the president of Dominica and had said there shall be no leader of opposition in the parliament, contrary to the Constitution? What if any one of these folks had said any of these damning utterances, these acts of threats, which is a criminal offense? There are persons who have said these things and who stand like pious priests, begging for sympathy from regional sources, while those persons who stood up, who've made a sacrifice, who've been victimized, who've been persecuted, many of them denied their gratuities, many of them denied jobs, many of them denied promotions, many of them denied a living wage. These are the persons who have been identified as criminals. But there's a justice one day, and that justice will come to pass. And the court system will be forced to take a hard look at itself as these cases wind their way through the criminal justice system, because the world will be watching. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening remarks, Irving. I know that Attorney Williams will have a lot more to say on some of the things that you introduced, the arguments you just introduced a moment ago. But I just wanted to bring in Attorney Ronald Charles at this point to sort of give us an update as to where things stand, because we know 19 people have been arrested so far. And maybe Ronald Charles, you're going to give us an update as to what is happening there.
Okay, thank you. First of all, let me say good evening to the esteemed group of men in the midst of Dr. Andre, Council Williams, and Mr. G. I call you the veteran as it relates there. Very soon, I believe CNN will be calling on you. So we might lose you. Having said that, and of course, Lambi, and to all your listeners, locally, internationally, thank you for the opportunity. From the 19th of March 2025, Wednesday, at approximately 4 p.m. in the afternoon, I have experienced something in Dominica that Dr. Andre has called putting the legal system on trial. I've received many calls from various persons on that day, and a number of persons have been arrested. 19 and counting. As we speak, There is a gentleman, David Williams, I believe, is at the cells. I may be short on this program because I need to visit him to give him some support and that to make the necessary arrangements for his interview. It appears to be pick up, interview, bail, and release. What I have realized over the past couple days, I shouldn't say couple days, but it's going on for about 14 days now. I could be subjected to the mathematicians in terms of the days, that there are two sets of people that are being targeted. There are a group of people that are being charged and they receive, as Dr. Andre has articulated, some of the conditions. And it ranges, some of the conditions are funny. Some people, conditions are, for example, that, and this is the interesting one, accused not to get involved in the discussion of this matter on the media, either directly or indirectly through any agent or third party. I think the only line that is missing there is including lawyers. Accused not to attend any public gathering, demonstration, protest, etc. during the duration of this matter. Now, when you have a gentleman like Mr. Boston, who has been an advocate for democracy maybe all his life and has been involved in political rivers, you're now saying to Mr. Boston that, hey, after you finish with Dr. Thompson Fontaine, Lennox Linton, and Edison James after 8 years, you're now telling Mr. Boston that, you must not interfere, you must not get involved, and your trend, or one would say, what the courts have been doing, the delay has been evident. So we have some issues there. And as Dr. Andre said, and as it's, I believe Mr. Williams would say the same, it's a direct interference with one constitutional right. The other thing I want to say about this, there is another group of people that are being charged under the same law. That is to say that X person did unlawfully, righteously, and tumultuously assembly together to the disturbance of the public, contrary to Section 4, Chapter 1002 of the Riot Act of Consolidated of Dominica. We have some persons that are getting, for example, that although this matter is indictable, and I'll touch a little bit under the sections or under the Bail Act, it touches and concern. Although this is indictable, there are persons under the same charge, under the same circumstances, that are getting self-bail. There are those that are no conditions attached. And then you have a group of people, one would say why? The question is why? There's a group of people given these conditions. And all of the 19 persons, with the exception of one person, Mr. Samuel Tura, which the prosecution brought up an issue that he had a pending matters and was on bail on, pending matters, and therefore they used 6FC of the Bail Act to say, well, he reoffended, and in the circumstances, bail should not be granted to him, separate and apart from him. Everybody else, including Mr. Samuel, have no records that the court should be afraid of. I call it their worksheet is clean. But nonetheless, they're given this condition. My belief is that everything that is happening here in Dominica for almost 25 years now is politically driven. There is an agenda that is being germinated by a group of people that believe Dominica is basically their plantation. And they can plant fig and then put in a root crop, and then they can do whatever they want. And it is sad for Dominica. But I'm happy that there are a group of people that are standing up for their rights and for their justice. And therefore, as I said earlier, the persons that are arrested gone into an interview. I will not disclose much as it relates to this, as this is still a live issue. And there are a lot of things that we will be bringing up, and that I don't want to set the authorities too wise, because basically one would conclude what they have been engaging in for the past 2017, 2015, I believe, February 7th, recently, 19th of March, is illegal. And as Dr. Andre said, there will be a price to pay for persons whose fundamental rights are being tampered with. When we look at our Bail Act, we now have a Bail Act. It took us a while. And the freedom fighters, I call them, have been given bail under Section 6 of the Bail Act. Now, mark you, Section 6 basically say where a person is accused or convicted of an offense that is punishable with imprisonment, the court may refuse application for bail, and therefore it now gives the defendant or the accused to prove to the court that they deserve bail. So bail is not of a right. And therefore, there are certain sections under 6.1a, for example, the court must be satisfied that there is a substantial grounds for believing that the person, if released on bail, whether subjected to conditions or not, would fail to surrender to custody. So one would have to say, and one would have to prove that the defendant will surrender, will not commit any offense while on bail, will not interfere with witnesses or otherwise pervert the course of justice. The court also is satisfied the defendant should be kept in custody for his own protection. Now, none of the defendants, this is not an issue for the protection of the community. For a matter of fact, all the people that have been arrested, 97% of them are persons within the community that are making a significant contribution towards their communities, be it in church, be it in sports, be it in religion, no matter what it is. They have been productive people. And therefore, one would have to satisfy this. And obviously, Section 7.2 C, D, and E, which is also part of Section 6. The defendant will not interfere with witnesses, which I've already mentioned, and the defendant should not be kept in custody for his own protection, and that it is in the public interest to grant the defendant bail. Now tell me, for all the arrests that have been done, every single one of them, the 19 of them, and I'm hearing there is another, information reaching me, we may have another 12 to come. So the issue that we are faced with is that all the defendants, every single one of them, have been law-abiding citizens. So the Bail Act is being used. We have to satisfy the Bail Act to ensure that persons get their bail. I must admit too that persons, Mr. G, have been coming forward with documents on the outside. A gentleman came on Friday and he said, "Hey, I heard you said that if persons want to help to just bail somebody and they have a land title and they have a valuation, and so they could come forward and be part and parcel of helping." And the gentleman came and he said, "I'm there, I'm ready." If you don't have somebody to bail him, I will bail him. And this kind of community spirit is coming because people are starting to realize what the police officers, instructed police officers, are doing is wrong. And people have a right, and I know Mr. Williams would probably elaborate on the issue of the legislation in reference to what the people have been crying about, registration of electors, and of course the other bills, one being passed on the 19th, and the content of it can be ventilated. But as we can see, the most fundamental part of it, which has not yet been passed, but which should be in debate, is the issue of campaign financing. And that is an issue for us. Because if you're going around with $10 million that you can't really account for, and somebody else is just going around with community spirit and engaging them with the state of the economy now, and Claire Harbour, I'm hearing, losing allegedly 800 workers can be subjected to corrections. It is something that is going to be hard to swallow. So having said that, this is where we're at. I will again thank all the persons who are engaged in bringing this issue to life and bringing it to the homes and on the tables of international persons or countries, our neighbors. I want to again thank, Dr. Andre personally for his work that he's been doing. Anything about Dr. Andre is every time he speaks, you have to get your pen out, on paper, because you have to take notes. That's the difference. So I always have great admiration for Dr. Andre. And I know you don't like me to say that. He's going to tell me next time you're on radio, don't say this. Anyway, but I appreciate that. And all the lawyers like Mr. Williams and, all those. I want to thank, of course, Dr. Joshua Francis, who have been assisting in more of the groundwork. We're going to definitely look into an application for bail at the High Court for Mr. Samuel Durand. He's been up there since the 19th, not the 19th, sorry, but I believe the 21st or the 22nd. I have to check my notes on that. And he's been up there since. I've visited him. And we have to definitely make this bail application soonest. But as we all hear it, it appears to be an abuse of the legal system, especially the lawyers that the police officers want to also put on trial, keeping them busy 24/7. So the application that needs to be made is rather, it coming slowly but surely. And we are gathering all the necessary information. And we are sure, we're relatively sure that we're going to be successful, and maybe very successful in this. So what I have to say, to give to close up on my small contribution, is that persons are still being arrested. They've been put in the cells. There are no beds in the cell. There's nothing to sleep on. Some of them had some of them had to be taken to the hospital. There was a gentleman that was arrested, and his mother is really stage 4 cancer, and he's the only one living with her. And when the police officers, and I'm reliably informed, when the police officers were going with him, his mother, who is ill, is saying to them, just allow me to give him some food before he leaves. And they refuse. And this hurt this lady very, very, very much so. And I'm hearing, the lady did not take this very well. There are others that had to be taken to the hospital because of one could say there are various dynamics that may have caused this. The cell in itself is not a place that no human being should really be interested in visiting, neither cleaning, more so to remain there for a night or two. There are no beds there. You see it on TV all the time. At least there are special beds that could be made. So this is where we are. The work continue, and I am grateful to be energized. It's draining a little, but I am energized to continue to do what I do. From there will be obviously there are a lot of persons doing some research. Dr. Andre may just be one of them as it relates to the next step to take to stop all this arrest. I'm hoping and praying that we can get one or two lawyers to come and do that part of it. I'm also willing to be part of this to stop, to bring some judicial review to whether or not what is going on is correct in law. And I believe we'll get favor in this. I will say to Dominicans, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity, Mr. G.
Ronald, let me ask you this. How many lawyers now have come forward to assist with those cases?
Okay, what I can say is we have, well, Joshua Francis have come forward. Of course, others, myself, there are other lawyers that are putting in the input, but not all of them are physically present. They might pick up the phone, give some, input there and there. Obviously, people like Mr. Dr. Andre is assisting us. Then we had Clara Shillingford Jr., Miss Jenny Jackson, came to do one interview. That's about it in terms of persons actively involved in visiting the cells and doing they call it the legwork. That's basically myself and Joshua Francis. Of course, Mr. Richards have assisted Mr. Hector John and Danny Lugay. But that is basically it. Mr. John Charles has also lent his hand. And of course, we have had Mrs. Blomquist assisting with being a surety to one or two of the persons arrested, which we are very grateful of. So that is basically what we have. And obviously, there are some other lawyers that I'm hearing that are doing some other activity. And Mr. Williams, of course, giving his input from overseas. And there are some other lawyers doing some work. So it is coming in to come, and hopefully it will get rounded very soon.
Well, thank you for this opening remarks here, Ronald. Attorney Earl Williams, you've listened to Dr. Andre, you've listened to Ronald Charles, and first of all, Dr. Andre mentioned this Riot Act established in 1714. It seems what a lot of this being applied to arrest people for this riotous and tumultuous and unlawful assembly. And then, of course, in the legislation, it speaks about confirmation, not re-registration. And it appears as if this confirmation process is supposed to happen over a period of 15 months. But there appears to be loopholes in that law which would allow the prime minister to call an election within that 15-month period on the same existing tainted list. So, and then of course, Ronald Charles said to us, everything that's happening now is politically driven. So we saw the incidents of Lennox Linton, Thompson, Fontaine, St. James for 8 years until the court had to dismiss the cases. And we've seen, of course, the attacks on Salisbury. So your thoughts on all of this?
Yes, let me say good evening to everyone on the panel, and just a little special good evening to Lambert Charles. I haven't seen him in a long while. So I know he's a stalwart and hard worker. And let me say good evening to the people of Salisbury, Coolbeach, and Monowachet, who probably still are the ones that put in the resistance that Dominica needs so that they can enjoy their democratic rights, live as free people in a democratic society. And they're not only doing that for Salisbury, they're doing it for everyone in Dominica. Let me start by saying, first of all, the right to assembly is a constitutional right. It's a right every single Dominican enjoyed, which is enshrined in the Constitution of Dominica. And they require no permit, no license to gather. Now, say what you want about the Riot Act. You know, it's unconstitutional, many parts of it. But for somehow, it still respects the right for people to assemble. It is the policemen who abused it. Because reading from the act, it's telling you it will only come when there's a riot. And as I said, a riot, definition of a riot involves violence. And Dr. Andre tried to explain it to us earlier, and he was asking us where were the signs of riot. So riot is a form of violence. And of course, if there is violence, people in a riotous behavior, tumultuous behavior, it doesn't have to be 12, it could be 2 people. Police have a right to engage because it is a breach of the peace. When you assemble for the common purpose, whether it's to hang out, whether it's 12 guys hanging out to look at chicks or whatever, they don't need no license to do that. Okay? So I want every Dominican to know that your right to assemble, it's one that is protected, it's in the Constitution, and it should be enjoyed by everyone. Number 2, your right to assemble is also a human right. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 21, dealt with the right to assemble of people all around the world. And this covenant has been ratified by Dominica. And many times, many times lawyers probably do not look at those conventions and those treaties that we sign, unless maybe something to do with trade or whatever. But there are also a lot of human rights which we are part of, which is part of our laws once it's ratified. And ratification involves passing it in Parliament. So it become part of our law, we can rely on it. And the human rights, and specifically the General Comment number 37 of 2020, talking about Article 21, it reminds us that the right to assemble is a human right. And not only this, it tends to deal with the so-called violence. First of all, it dispenses with the whole idea of permit and getting license to assemble. They decide that's not in it. However, they do condemn violence, but one of the strongest areas of their comment is what will be regarded as violence. And I think it's 15. 15, on this article here, comment number 37, 15, read, a peaceful assembly stand in contradistinction to one characterized by widespread and serious violence. You had widespread and serious violence. We say we must distinguish between them. The terms peaceful and non-violent are thus interchangeably in this context. The right to peaceful assembly may by definition not be exercised using violence. Violence in the context of Article 21 typically entails the use by the participants of physical force against others that is likely to result in injury or death or serious damage to property. That is what they describe violence to mean. And they went on further. Mere pushing and shoving or disruption of vehicular or pedestrian movement or daily activities do not amount to violence. So we must understand, when police come in to disrupt a crowd merely because they think they are preventing others from going out their business, this is not a reason to interfere in that right. Not because some people pass in and they might shove them or they might do this, it is not enough. They need to see serious violence, violence that will cause death or serious injury to other human beings or their property. And for those of us who witness through the videos, through the live stream of what was happening on March 19th, it was nowhere close to what we call violence. Because the case is going to boil down on whether or not it was riotous behavior and the definition of riot. So, as Dr. Irvin Andre said in many times, he only see some tumultuous behavior which started by the police. But the people who were there, they had a common purpose. And I heard some people were charged because they moved the rail, they shift the rail. That does not amount to violence. The rail is not property that can be damaged to the extent that somebody lost something. You know, so people moving the rails, moving the guardrail, that is not violence. People disrupting traffic from flowing, that is not violence. So this is a fundamental right in our constitution, and it's also a human right according to the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. So although this government is trying to send a message to scare Dominicans from further participating in that type of activity for their own benefit, Dominicans need to know their right. And Dominicans cannot allow the government to take that right away from them. Because, as I said, one of the justices, one of the lords, who said many times dictatorship don't come by coup d'etat, but it comes by the very first touch, taking it piece by piece, and one day you wake up and you have a dictatorship. So we must understand our rights here, and we must learn many times for government to respect our rights. Now, we talk about the Riot Act, and it is Dr. Andre who tells us, okay, this act was in 18, but by the saving clause, when we go into the independence, a lot of the laws before end up being part of our laws, and this Riot Act was one of them who came by the saving clause. However, that does not mean it trumps our constitution. It does not mean it does not have to be in conformity with our constitution. Section 117 of the Constitution says, this constitution is the supreme law of the land. And any law which contravenes or is inconsistent with the constitution is null and void to the extent of its inconsistency. The Riot Act, to the extent that it violates our peaceful right to assembly, to the extent that there is a provision, and you wouldn't believe what that provision provides. It provides that after that proclamation is made in the name of His Excellency, and after 1 hour, which is another thing too, because the police appears they didn't even wait an hour for the people to disperse. And if after 1 hour people fail to disperse, the act says the people who are there, like the police, magistrate, peace officer, anyone who is there assisting to disperse or arrest the crowd, they are immune from any liability. So for that period of time, the human beings, the Dominicans who are there, they can kill you, they can maim you, they can do you anything whatsoever under the sun. And this law is saying they have immunity, no liability at all for their actions. We're in 2025. How can we have a law on our books? How can we have a law on our books that is the laws of Dominica that will give police the unfettered right to kill Dominicans, to do what they want with Dominicans, and they're free and clear? So what we're seeing here, this piece of legislation, part of the defense, I think, is to challenge that Riot Act, to get it off our books. It has no place in our democracy. It doesn't facilitate our democracy. It only facilitates in this government because we have the Public Order Act, which they could charge the individuals. But instead, they go under the Riot Act. Because you know why? The maximum penalty you can receive under the Riot Act is 5 years. The maximum penalty you can get under the Public Order Act is 6 months. So the Public Order Act was designed for people who are protesting, have demonstrations, and so forth, that if they're arrested, they will not have a quote-unquote a criminal record. Whereas the Riot Act is an indictable offense, which is going to stain you if you are convicted for the rest of your life with an indictable offense. So the Riot Act as well is 6 months jail. Obviously, the bail is not going to be exorbitant. And I will come to the bail in a while. But we have to understand as well, even the Constitution, we don't hear that much, protects our right to bail. I know we always jump in on the Bail Act, but there's a constitutional right to bail in Dominica. And for the purpose of talking about it, because we don't talk about it much, maybe I need to, where's the Constitution? All right. Section 3(2) of the Constitution. Any person who is arrested or detained shall be, as soon as reasonably practicable, and in any event, and in any case, no later than 24 hours after such arrest or detention, in a language that he understands, of the reasons for his arrest and detention. I was concerned about that when Hector John was arrested and he spent the weekend. And on the Sunday, after 2 days, 48 hours, that's the time they had him questioning. From the time you pick up someone and you detain them and you arrest them, from there then you need to tell them why you arrest them, unless it is not practical to do so because the person resisting and the person this. But otherwise, once you pick up the person, you must tell them in a language that they can understand. If it's patois they can understand, you have to tell it to them in patois. If it's now a Spanish and the person only understand Spanish, you have to get an interpreter. And my learned friend, Dr. Andre, is a judge, and he's aware of that. You know, if they have somebody that cannot understand English, they cannot proceed any part of the prosecution in a language they cannot understand. They need to get interpreters. So it goes on subsection 3. Any person who is so arrested and detained, I'm still on the Constitution, for the purpose of bringing him before a court in execution of the order of a court on reasonable suspicion of he having committed a crime. Subsection 5. If any person arrested or detained, as mentioned in subsection 3b of this section, is not tried within a reasonable time, then without prejudice to any further proceedings that may be brought against him, he shall, not may, he shall be released either unconditionally or upon reasonable conditions, including in particular condition as a reasonably necessary to ensure that he appears at a later date for trial, for proceedings preliminary to trial as well. So in other words, the Constitution gives the limit you have to have bail. So all the issues of giving person bail because they do this and say he might commit another offense and whatever, all that probably just in the Bail Act. Is the Bail Act in violation of the Constitution? That is something we need to challenge, because the Constitution set the parameters and another law cannot bring new things. So the purpose, the raison d'etre for putting the bail, as far as the Constitution is concerned, is conditions that will ensure you will be back for further proceedings. Now, to tell a man he cannot earn his livelihood if he's a politician to go to meetings and talk to the media, that contravenes the Constitution. It contravenes the Constitution, his constitutional right, because we have a constitutional right to bail, and the Constitution set the limits and the parameters by which we should set bail. And if any bail act contravenes or inconsistent with that section of the Bail Act that put all those other hard conditions and you're able to take a man's livelihood from them. Bail never intend for you to take another livelihood. Bail never intend for it to be another punishment so that we have double jeopardy. We have a situation that is double jeopardy because they're punishing them twice. They turn bail into a punishment. Only in Dominica we can see those things. So definitely, this is a denial of the constitutional right. It is a breach and an attack of their constitutional right to liberty. And this in itself must be challenged. Now, even the Public Act had me for some pause, because I cannot understand, even in the day of today, Section 8, subsection 2 of the Public Act, saying any person who at a public meeting or in any public procession wears or carry any shirt, dress, or garment, or any banner, flag, or emblem bearing threatening, abusive, insulting, or obscene words or slogan with intent to offend public morality or to provoke a breach of the peace, or whereby a breach of the peace is likely, in the opinion of the commissioner, to be occasion is guilty of an offense. Come on, we're in 2025. Somebody the t-shirt and what they write on it is free speech. How even if it offends morality? If they have something you do not like, if there's something on the t-shirt that offends you, you could send the police to arrest them. They're guilty of an offense. No, even the public officers, that is freedom of expression. That is freedom of speech, what people wear. In the olden days, it was different. But in this modern time, they tell you what you wear, what you have written, it is tantamount to your fundamental right of expression, your right to free speech, and it should not be challenged for that flimsy excuse. Okay? So, in the US, even when speech touch on incitement, the Supreme Court have said, no, if the assignment is directed at imminent lawlessness action, then it should be curtailed. The government should intervene and curtail it. If the incitement is for some future date, government cannot control that. So even when They are quote unquote guilty of incitement. You know, and that is what happened to Trump. Trump had many speeches that were, that people would feel that incitement, but it was not imminent. So that's why it was allowed. It was not imminent danger. And I think that all stemmed from assault, because in assault, you have to be in imminent danger. If somebody threatens to assault you some future date, it's not really an assault. And the government of the United States deals with incitement as a means of free speech in the same manner. But Dominica, I've seen people said certain things in terms of the former pal rep for Goodwill, you know, and he was arrested for some speech that was far, far, far from incitement. You know, UWP, a lot of UWP members of parliament been arrested for things that far, far, far from incitement in Dominica. But all these summing up together is to stifle free speech, to practically kill the opposition, and we'll have a one-party rule for the next 25 years again. So probably for 50 years, we'll be under one-party rule. And he can have his one-party rule if he wants. But in doing so, people should be able to enjoy their Dominica, their freedoms, their rights to democracy, their right to assemble, their right to free speech. You cannot take away this from them. Now, you mentioned something you want me to talk about in terms of the law before I close my opening remarks about the confirmation process. Now, one of the things that is not being mentioned, that the Prime Minister promised the Electoral Commission and everyone that he will not have overseas centers. Somehow the law still provides for overseas centers. And the law still talks for confirmation. Are we going to have confirmation in the overseas centers? He made this statement over and over. No, 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 no. Everything will be in Dominica. Nothing. So why put it in the law? Why give Dominicans, including the Electoral Commission, your word that you will not have those overseas centers, but you still make it part of the law of Dominica that there will be overseas centers? And then instead of putting re-registration, you put confirmation. Now, the confirmation is for 15 months. And of course, you cannot put a fetter over the constitution that gives the Prime Minister the right to call election when he wants. So obviously, he can call election when he wants. However, the law makes provisions for that. The law specifically says if election is called before the 15 months is up, then we're back to the old list. So that election will be called on the old list. So we don't know if we're going to have an election on the old list or if we're going to have a new one. But the whole idea of confirmation, I don't know what the Prime Minister have in mind. But as far as I'm concerned, the definition of confirmation should be registration. In other words, someone who come to confirm their registration as a voter should ensure they meet all the qualifications to be a voter on that list for confirmation. In other words, if you come and confirm, they should ask you the question, have you been residing in Dominica for the past 6 months? Not only in Dominica, have you been residing in the particular area? For instance, I know a lot of people from Salisbury and they registered in Roseau. So if they come to confirm in Salisbury, the question should be asked, have you resided in Salisbury for the past 6 months? No, you have been in Roseau. So why only come and confirm in Salisbury? You're not living there. You don't meet the qualification to confirm. To meet confirmation, people have to meet the qualification. You cannot just come out from where you come out and just come and say, I come and confirm. What that means? You just give your ID and I'm that person you confirm. You're going to be on the list as an elector. And if you come and confirm, are you 18 years old? How can you come and confirm to vote and you're not 18 years old? You know, confirmation means you come and saying, hey, I meet the qualification. Okay, I meet the qualifications to be there. And that is the whole idea of overseas people coming on vote. I'm saying they have rights that Dominicans living in Dominica do not have. Because a Dominican living in Dominica, if he lives in St. Joseph, he cannot come Salisbury and register. He is living in Dominica, but he cannot register on the Salisbury list. Okay? And Salisbury is in two parts. If I'm living higher up Salisbury, I cannot register in the lower Salisbury. I will not be accepted. I'll be on the higher part. But a person can be in New York, Switzerland, London, anywhere, and just come and register. That is an advantage that these people have. Dominicans living in the society do not have. So, in all, we see Prime Minister, he's the one who was talking about campaign financing reform and how it will level the playing field. And all of a sudden he's saying it's complex. Why not make it complex? We do not have a complex system. America have a complex system. So it is complex because they have CPACs, they have this, they have all those different organizations giving money and everything have limits. They had an issue is how much CPAC to give. They take that to court and they say corporations are people too and have their fundamental right to give how much they want to give. So it's a complex system. Dominica is not that complex. We have 21 constituencies. And we just devise a system to assist. We have two political parties. And you say, yes, small political parties always die anyway. So it is an incentive that if they want to reach a stage where they will get funding from government, they'll work hard to reach that stage. You understand? So because you don't want anybody to just open up a political party anytime and just going to get money, and the next election come in, they discard that party, let's form another party again and get money. It's not so going to work. You have to show your commitment and your seriousness, and the people show you the level of support. Even in the US, for presidential candidates to come and the debate, they have to have a certain percentage of votes. When they do the poll, if the poll don't give you a certain percentage of votes, you're not being part of those debates. You can continue running if you want. But, so we do not have a complex society. So no need for any complex, campaign reform. Simple as that. You just have something where you give political parties, the established political parties, the type of support they have. We can do whatever to measure it. And that's it. Because in the end, you can just do it to pal reps if you don't want to go parties. So really, it's just a way of trying to put something behind his back he championed for when he was in opposition. Now that he's sitting pretty, he's telling us money don't win elections. Money don't win elections, but the opposition cannot bring all the overseas artists you're bringing down. We cannot bring Destro and all those people you're bringing down. All these campaign materials and T-shirts and all this fat and good time, we cannot give this. All the long line, people coming for money on a Wednesday, red clinic. We cannot do that in UWP office. We wish you could do the same. Then the playing field would be even. So yes, money wins campaign because campaign is expensive. You have to do advertisement. You have to have radio program. You have to provide for transportation. You have to have ads on the TV and radio. So I don't know what he's talking about money to win campaign. A party that broke cannot go far. So in all, I think Dominica is a juncture, and we need to continue to do what we're doing here. Those of us that can contribute need to continue to contribute and be part of the fight, because it seems it's going to be a long fight, and all brains and all hands should be on deck.
Thank you so much for this opening contribution to Earl. Dr. Andre, this attack on free speech. Lamb, you have a call? You want to take a call?
Good evening, caller. Please go ahead with your call. Caller, you may go ahead. You may proceed.
Okay, so we've lost that caller. Maybe the person will call back. But Dr. Andre, I was saying, this attack on free speech. I mean, Earl looked at the Constitution and what it allows, and even in terms of the bail conditions. I mean, these onerous bail conditions that basically to prevent free speech, free assembly. And Lamb, you want to take a call now?
Let's try that call again. Caller, please go ahead.
Yes, gentlemen, I'm listening to I was listening to the gentleman before. What a wonderful speaker, yes. But my point is, Dominica might be a democratic country on paper, gentlemen. But in practice, right now, Dominica is a socialist country. And the only way you're going to get changes in Dominica, and don't cut me off, it is for force. Because God Himself, God Almighty, who we worship, used force to liberate Jericho. Okay? So you guys may be saying, oh, you can't use force. God used force to liberate Jericho. And that's the only way you're going to get that scallywag that calls himself Prime Minister out of office. Thank you.
Thank you for the call. Yes, Dr. Andre, I mean, you really want to comment on this because it seems to me all of what is happening there is to scare people, is to prevent them from assembling, to prevent them from demonstrating for their rights and their human rights. And so it seems to me it's really all an attack on free speech in order to keep this regime in office. Because even the question of the campaign finance, I mean, the prime minister said no other country in the Caribbean has campaign finance laws, but we know that's not true. That is definitely not true. You yourself, Dr. Andre, have done some research on this. So it is not true. And to say it is such a complicated thing, what is so complex about it?
There's nothing complicated about this. It's just inconvenient. It doesn't fit into the overall plan. The overall plan is to remain in power indefinitely, to keep depriving the consolidated fund of the proceeds of sale of passports, to keep those proceeds hidden in mysterious accounts, as one of these passport sellers has told us, to keep being able to finance campaigns without any limit on spending, to keep the opposition in a state of perpetual poverty, to keep certain persons from using the net proceeds of these sales to live lavish lifestyles, to keep paying NEP workers $800 or $1,000 a month, to keep living in a $65,000 per month mansion. That doesn't even include the utilities, which perhaps amount to another $15,000 to $20,000. 90% of Dominica's civil servants do not earn $80,000 a year. That is what this is all about. That is exactly what this is all about. And that is why it was legitimate for persons to express their constitutional rights. Now, there's one aspect Earl talked about, but which is even more egregious: the guarantee of state immunity or immunity to state actors who kill or maim persons involved in a legitimate expression of their constitutional rights. You remember the last time we saw that type of legislation? It's called the Dread Act. The Dread Act. And you know what, Mr. G? The Dread Act was never challenged. It was never challenged in court. So our lawyers today, those who are contributing to the fight, whether they are doing so openly and publicly or quietly, it's fine. The mantle of being a leader in the legal profession rests upon them. They have a historical obligation to challenge the legitimacy of that piece of legislation which confers state immunity on state agents. They are not beyond reproach. They were in the last 10 years at least 2 extrajudicial killings. What did we see on social media rising out of that March 19th? One man being slapped senseless to the ground, and other police set upon him like a bunch of hyenas. That is the immunity that they deserve. The lawyers have to live up to their faith, to diligently, passionately help to bring judicial redress to those who have been harmed. That is the price which democracy demands. The price of the legal process going through its course, giving people an avenue to seek redress for being wronged. Whether you're a journalist whose camera was attempted to be stolen or who was assaulted in that process, whether it's this unfortunate gentleman who slapped senselessly to the ground while other state agents beating on him when he was defenseless on the ground, whether persons who were stoned not by rioters but by the police. The people should be able to seek redress. That is the price. That a deviation from law enforcement procedures, that is the price that has to be paid. People seeking judicial recourse and having a court of law make decisions on issues such as, for example, unlawful assault, battery, whether this legislation which confers state immunity on state actors should remain on the books, given that the Constitution guarantees the full protection of the law and the right of every citizen to seek redress in a court of law. This is the challenge to our lawyers, and I should say that I commend those. There are quite a few of them, and we cannot, quite frankly, blame those who chose to keep a low profile. We all have our part to play in this. This is probably the most important time that we have in our legal history. Are we going to make the same mistake again with the Dread Act, where there was a conspiracy of silence? And listen to this. When the Dread Act was passed, it was passed unanimously. A betrayal. Total and complete betrayal. Because the Dreads were regarded as the enemies of the state. Should history be allowed to repeat itself? It should not. And that's why I commend those lawyers who are making their contribution. And we can urge them in any way we can, whether we have to bring a plate of Bacanek and dashing to them, or help meet their challenges, so to speak. We have to do or play our part, because this is very serious business. You cannot have people running roughshod over the rights of citizens and get away with it. Thank you.
Let me just.
Ronald, 1 second. Lambi, you want to take a quick call?
Call, are you still there? Please go ahead.
Yes, I'm there. Good evening, Lambi, Mr. G.
Good evening.
This program. My good friend and brother Earl, Dr. Andre, and the same Ronald Charles. Mr. G, I have two main questions, one for Mr. Andre and one for Attorney Williams. And that is, Dr. Andre, are we satisfied that the 10th the CCJ warned Dominica about? I don't know if it was a warning or if it was, how I would say it, an advice. But they talk about Dominica, or they warn Dominica that they should not go into another election with those states. Now, knowing that law that just been passed by Parliament, are we satisfied that all these states is out? And if not so, Honorable Earl, can we put an injunction on any election in the future whether snap, whether general election, because if those things have not been removed by Parliament, I think we have a problem, because the court is also a third branch of government, and we cannot ignore the laws and the Constitution, as Honorable rightly said so. So even if Parliament passed this law and it hasn't removed the 10, the city they warn us about, tell us we shouldn't go in another election, can we put an injunction to stop any election from proceeding? Thank you, I'm listening.
Thank you.
Since he called my name first, I might as well answer first. A law can be unjust. Go ask the South Africans in the era of apartheid. A law can sanction inequality. A law can sanction corruption. Because a law has a moral component. It is not just an enactment based on legal principles. It has a moral underpinning, a sense of what is right and what is wrong. And the simple fact of the matter is the bill regarding electoral reform, which was enacted on March the 19th, to the extent that it gives the unfettered discretion to use any amount of money from mysterious funds that should be in the consolidated fund in the first place. It is wrong. And I applaud those who have sought to challenge this. They should challenge this. There's precedent from Belize, which gives us much hope to get this case to the CCJ as quickly. That is the devil that they fear. Because some of their lawyers haven't had too much success upstairs. You peg us all. They do not want it to go up. They want it to remain before selected judges. And that is why we have to take full advantage of the legal process, irrespective of how slow it runs. What else is there for us to do? Somebody said we should turn to God. Of course, but we've been turning to God for donkey years, Gasso. And the God tell us that he told me in my bed, what is this? I will not help you if you don't help yourself. So I changed my strategy once he told me that. He doesn't speak to me often, but I changed my strategy. I have to help myself. And he's saying the same to us. You have to help yourselves. You can't just sit down with your arms folded and saying, but he'll help you. You have to do unto others. You have to assist your brothers. I'm not a pastor. In fact, then again, I don't drive an SUV with tinted windows, which I got duty free. I don't do it. I prefer to do it by these little beads that come off oftentimes from my brow in the middle of the day. So we have to help ourselves. And you know what is the most comforting thought arising out of the March 19th? It is a groundswell of support, not from the leaders of the region. On the contrary, that's another story. But from other persons in opposition, the man on the street. You know, even in Trinidad, quite frankly, which has its own cesspool of corruption, people have reached out to me. I've met in legal circles. What is happening in Dominica? You see? So we have to take solace that there are sympathetic souls out there who can relate to us. And they're looking at us to help, so that to see what we're doing to help ourselves. Because it's only when we help ourselves, they will offer help to us in return. So folks, charity begins at home. You can learn anything from anybody. In fact, I have to confess, and I don't confess often, but during Carnival, I learned from Lady S. Is it Lady S? How to make a little bakes with a little oil and with a little flour. Well, she doesn't use salt, obviously. But we can learn from each and everybody. No man is an island. No woman too. This is a collective fight, irrespective of who you support, whether you like it or not. Because you know that's a saying, Matt plays this thing. When they pick you up and you have nobody comes forward, and when your turn is come to be picked up, who are you going to look for help? So we have to offer help to those folks. Somebody had to use their shoes as a thing. Someone started vomiting in custody. They had to scream to the police, take him or her to the hospital, for God's sakes. Some people think that jail is a constitution-free card. You can do whatever you want. We're not in a banana republic. People have rights. People who are placed in jail have rights too. You can't just treat them as if they are fodder, as if they are animals, for God's sakes. Deprive them of areas to relieve themselves, to sleep, drenched in stench. Terrible. The spotlight is in Dominica. We will be found wanting as a community, and we will pay that price for our misdeeds. Thank you.
Mr.
Yes, Ronald.
Yeah. No, I sorry. I just wanna touch base on the issue of
Well, I'll come back to you in a minute to answer the question. Let's
Yeah.
run with this guy.
the issue of preventing of free speech. And before I do that, I also want to say, in terms of the Riot Act, so we have many acts in Dominica and many laws on the books. So rather than the authorities going through these acts and saying these acts should not be part and parcel of our laws, let's get rid of them, they're going back and dig them to come back and put people in the situations that they are in. I believe free speech, right, it has serious political, social, legal, and economical consequences. Political consequences because you see what is happening in Dominica. The rise of the authorities, right? Government is suppressing opposition parties, leading to authoritarian rule. You know that the CBI case, the issue of accountability, when you press people and you tell them you cannot speak, this is what you get growing within the society. The censorship and propaganda, controlling the speech. Hey, you cannot go, and talk about the issues affecting your life as it relates to electoral reform. You cannot talk about campaign financing. Leave that alone. We're nice. Rather than you worrying about that, we'll play a video, welcoming some school children in our office, everything nice, while 19 people are being prosecuted illegally because everything nice. It's about a show. And we sit there and we believe it's easy thing that is coming. And I see comments of persons coming and saying, well, this man is a smart man. While people are being arrested, taking care of the young people, the children, and giving them bags with red bags to go home. This is the consequences of suppressing free speech. Social consequences. Ideas. Beautiful ideas are involved in. Look at how Mr. Williams is able to tear apart and look at the Riot Act and really dissect it in a way that is easy for the average man to understand. Fair. So that the 19 people that are brave, they now have a bail condition. Don't go in the gathering, so everybody stay home. And then when you call a thing, they say, hey, only 200 people that are there, only 150, nobody turns up. Because you send in advance and reverse to deal with people with your Riot Act. Unrest, legal and human rights consequences. Mr. Williams spoke about the violation of international law, human rights. This is things that we have to protect, and we go overseas in all these conferences and we embrace those things. And we say it's good and we sign on to it. And then our people are suffering. We should be protecting people like Mo and not trying to take the tripod away from them. Let them be able to tell the world, let us see what is going on. Economic consequences, that's why all of us are waiting for a house now. And there are over hundreds of persons losing their homes at the court in the civil division. And people are coming to court now crying because they remain $20,000 to pay on a house and they cannot do it. A house they spent their lifetime to do. The foreigners will stop coming. They will say, I don't want to be in Dominica. Deba. These are the consequences of suppressing free speech. And therefore, what we're doing here is fundamental. Now, I have taken some notes, and I won't put it on the record, but I will try my best to work alongside all the lawyers that are now definitely going to challenge these things. And therefore, it's a good platform for those who are listening. It's not as easy as it may sound, however, because you're talking about lawyers that are engaged in their own, private businesses and are doing things for clients and so forth. But the collective goal can move mountains. And therefore, we should go for it. And as Dr. Andre said, you see, Dr. Andre, we have to quote you all the time. They're afraid to go upstairs. Upstairs bad. Upstairs have some bad fellas. I like that saying. They're afraid to go upstairs. And therefore, we have to do what we have to do. And I will continue to volunteer. I mean, over the past 14 days, if I check it correctly, it has been really abuse of the lawyer system. The work that I have been doing with the persons. And sometimes all the people remember when you're arrested, your mother and your auntie and so, okay, I come and see you. Only the lawyer. And that comfort and that instructions and that advice is fundamental in the first 5 minutes of his or her arrest. And I've always said to people, that they have to take it this way. So I will use that opportunity to make my exit. Sorry. I do apologize. I'm now going up to the police station. There's a gentleman that I have not yet seen. I promised to pass and see him this evening. I'm going to do this because I believe it's important that he have a word or two with me. And we'll continue to do what we do. I want to thank you, Mr. G, and thank Mr. Williams, and thank Dr. Andre and Lambie. And of course, you have a technician there that normally don't show his face, but within seconds, he was able to get me back online. So I want to thank everybody and thank for the opportunity. And I continue to be resonate with whatever I do. I may not be super perfect, but the bottom line is this freedom of speech that is almost in the end of the stream to affect Dominica. We must put a trench across it to prevent it from happening. And thank you for the opportunity. May God continue to bless Q95 and bless all those who are working hard in the diaspora, Dominica by and large. And the education that I am now receiving is one that I embrace because knowledge is power. I make my exit. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronald. Thank you. Earl, there was a question the caller put to you. And of course, you want to comment on any of the other matters that you want to comment on. But just before we do that, Lam, do you want to take a call?
Yes. Caller, are you still there? No. Caller, please go ahead with your call. Hello, go ahead, please.
Hey, blessings, Rambi, and everybody, all the doctors and the lawyers in the house. Blessings to you all. Let me give thanks to Ronald Charles. I notice he's making his exit. Dr. Andre, what's up, gang? Just quickly, I would like Earl or Dr. Andre to elaborate on a question or a concern I have. Am I with you all, gentlemen, or you all with me?
Yes, you're loud and clear.
Okay. I heard Dr. Andre made mention of the Dread Act, and which are still on the books. I was a very young guy, and being in the mountains by a gentleman, carrying bananas and so. And I could see police officers passing with some dead bodies covered with some, what they call zelmush, the fly wings, a type of thing that look like wings of a fly, and maybe banana leaves and whatever. Dead bodies. I can never forget that. Can that law be resurrected and be implemented or used based on the circumstances which would be convenient for any ruling government, because it is on the books? Because what I'm learning, look, Dr. Andre saying what? Over 500 years is not just 1897, it's 1714. Saying over 500 years. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes.
Yeah, if it is preceding laws that would be contravening that old law, how could that old law stand? How could that old outdated law stand if modern day laws are taking away the legs from underneath that old law? There is a saying, they say the law is an ass. Excusing all your faces, gentlemen. How could that level of contradiction, that paradox, play when you have an administration quite dictatorial and brutal and criminal, unconstitutional, can use that outdated law to nullify laws that are contravening the effects of that outdated law, if I state my case correctly? Dr. Andre, I'm taking you up. I want to be a lawyer too.
Yeah, well, I don't think you would need much training. You've stated quite succinctly and very eloquently and very correctly this business of these old pieces of legislation, which litter various Caribbean constitutions, have been the source of much litigation. I can tell you, I can cite a number of cases which ended up in the CCJ, where the CCJ has struck down those laws, either, and if not striking them down, reduced the interpretation of those laws to make them consistent with the constitution of these islands. And that is why I say that the lawyers can either accept this challenge to their profession or can fail to accept that challenge, and therefore, in my respect, will fail their mission as the legal custodians of our laws. The fact of the matter is the whole question of state immunity, and bear in mind what I said, Blessings, the Dread Act was never challenged. I refuse to believe, in fact, I do not think for 1 minute that the lawyers in our midst will allow that to happen without a fight. Because like I said, this is not a trial of those 19 persons. It's a trial of the resilience of our professionals. And it's a trial of the nature of the type of democracy, to the extent that we still have one, the nature of governance in Dominica. Literally, the eyes of the world is upon us. And there are a number of courts, whether high courts, whether Court of Appeals, or our apex courts, are waiting with bated breath to see our lawyers come up and stand and give them arguments based on precedents, to give them the ammunition to cast those laws by the wayside. And that is why I'm very optimistic about our future in terms of those challenges. It's the only independent recourse that we have to seek judicial redress. And we have to take advantage of it despite its flaws, but we have to make the system work. We have to make sure that someone can say, yes, there is rule of law in Dominica. Any government seeking to perpetuate themselves in power can reintroduce, call it a different name, a law similar and analogous, because the dreads in the 70s are the opposition in the 2025 or 2020s. Those who oppose, those who stand for principle, those who stand for good governance, those who stand for the rule of law are now the dreads. Throw water in their faces. There will be blood if you vote for these loathsome people. They invoke the Riot Act if you peacefully protest. Persons of conscience should not allow this to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Lambi, you want to take a call?
Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. First, I want to thank Earl for bringing up what I think is the central aspect of the discussion, that is the Constitution. I have been for the past several years trying to focus our minds in that direction, but I understand the resistance among that I've found along some lawyers. It's a resistance that I think has shown itself in many other places, and that is that when we became independent, we came from a system of what we call parliamentary sovereignty, which is what still holds in England. And most of our lawyers, the early lawyers, were trained in England. And in that system, whatever parliament passes cannot be challenged because it is the king's parliament and the king can't be challenged. When we became independent, there was a shift, but our lawyers are still under that original thinking. We shifted to constitutional sovereignty, where the constitution is sovereign, not parliament, not the king. And all the old laws that were grandfathered in under the 7th clause were created under that old system. They were written for the king, by the king's parliament, to control the people in the colonies. But our constitution was not written by the king, even though parliament in England wrote it on our behalf. That's why the constitution begins with the people. And the people would not write any document which is designed to suppress them. And our lawyers have not yet gotten that into their understanding. I don't blame them for it. But I think what has happened with Earl bringing this up, and I'm glad he has done so, is that we understand that what we need is an education in what the Constitution means for us. In my review of what has been going on, I listened to what the Attorney General said on Kyrie on Saturday night. It is obvious the Attorney General of Dominica does not understand the difference between the Constitution and the laws of Dominica. And most of the problems associated with this electoral reform issue have come up because the Attorney General of Dominica has misinterpreted the Constitution and he has given the Prime Minister bad advice. In fact, I have said elsewhere, I'll say again, the entire process by which the laws were introduced in Parliament was unconstitutional, and so that the laws themselves, although they have been now signed by the President, are void under Section 117 of the Constitution. We can't discuss that here, but I think that we ought to take Earl up on what he said and follow that direction and understand that we need to have education in this country, and then it will go region-wide on what the Constitution means in independent former colonies. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. And Earl, well, over to you now, because you know you've been challenged on several occasions now. You ought to unmute your mic. Your mic is muted, Earl.
Yeah, the first caller is right in terms of the British Parliament. The British Parliament historically could do anything under the sun. I think there was one quote in that said they could do anything under the sun except make a man a woman or a woman a man. But now that is possible. But in those days, that is what they said. And the reason for that is something Dr. Andre referred to earlier, that they do not have a written constitution. So in England, Parliament is the last say. However, when you look at places like the United States, Canada, Dominica, we have a constitution, and that constitution is our limit. So in other words, although England did not have a constitution, but it makes sure all its former colonies have its constitution, and that is the guidelines by which the country is supposed to operate. And all laws you make have to follow that constitution. So he's right that the king courts and the king do what they want and so forth. But over the years, we see, even in England, they start having limitations. And the limitations start when we start having natural justice. So natural justice comes in, you have to follow natural justice, then human rights come in. So more and more, even the British Parliament is being fettered, okay, by doing what it wants, even though they do not have a constitution. But we have a constitution in Dominica, and that's what makes it different. And in terms of that, I can go to what Blessings was referring to in terms of the law, whether or not it can be used. I think they escaped with that in the 70s. But right now, I think the International Criminal Court and the human rights, they very much concerned about what they call extrajudicial killing, where policemen think they can be judge, jury, and executioner. This is what was happening with the Dread Act. So a police could kill you, and he has full immunity. They even give citizens the right to kill dreads with full immunity, just like they gave in the Riot Act. They have full immunity for anybody you kill after the proclamation, and anybody who assisting them can kill anybody and they have immunity. So there is that comparison there with that extrajudicial killing. And I think the International Criminal Court takes it seriously. Even St. Lucia, I mean, some of the high-powered people, they were taking diplomatic visas, were taking all these things for the same type of extrajudicial killing, because they were tough on crime and would kill anybody on drugs, and would kill anybody that get involved in drugs, and a lot of killings happened during that time. So extrajudicial killing is something that I know they're not taking lightly. And this act, if it have to resurface because still on our books, I think it will get a challenge instantly. Number two, Leroy Shillingford earlier on was asking if we can put a stop on the next election by way of an injunction. Usually, historically, you cannot restrain the crown or even put a mandamus on the crown. And that is why when we come to court and it involves the crown, we usually ask for declaration. So as far as stopping an election is concerned, I don't see any court going to stop that, because whether you go under the old act, they have the authority to call elections. And you can only go if there is some impropriety, procedural impropriety or something, you can call the act. But the act itself gets full 100% support of the parliament. But if something had gone procedurally wrong, they did not follow something in the constitution in terms of passing the act, then you could challenge it, then you could put a stop on it because of the procedural impropriety and so forth and so forth. But if the act is the legal law of the land and the government is going to call election, even though you do not like the act, putting an injunction might not be successful. So even the act is not to the wishes and fancies of the people. The government is in power. The act was duly passed in parliament. It is the law of the land. We need to continue to do what we're doing, because we say when we're in a democratic society, it is the people who have the power. And for the longest while, Dominicans have sat back and allowed the Labour Party government to think they have the power and they cannot do much. The power are in the hands of the people. And if they decide they do not want this government to continue from tomorrow, they can take the power back in their hands If people decide they're not going to work, they're not participating in anything, the whole country closed down, government cannot govern the people that don't want to be governed by them. They have to stand down. Because the whole machinery of government is off. People decide we're not going to be governed by you. That's it. Because you still have the residual power is always in the hands of the people in a democratic society, not the government. And people must understand they have the power and they can exercise that power at any moment in time. They can wake up tomorrow and say, enough is enough, and that's it. The whole country halt. And I saw the Prime Minister on an interview, and he said, only just like 150 people were there. Come on, what's nonsense? The human rights protect one person having a demonstration. One person can have their placard and trying to send a message to government. That's enough. That's his right. So whether there is 10 or 12, it's immaterial. It's just the right of that 12 people to do it. It is the right of that 150 people to do it. Not because it's 150, you want to take away the right from them. Also, it was 10,000 or 5,000, you would allow them to do it. But because it's 150, no. These 150 people, they have rights. And they were exercising their democratic rights and their constitutional rights. So whether it's 5, whether it's 10, whether it's 1, it's irrelevant. The Prime Minister needs to get that message, because I cannot believe he was on a Caribbean radio and trying to condemn the match because of the number of people attended. That was just a shame. It was shameful.
Lami, you want to take a call?
Yes, there's a caller in there. Caller, please go ahead.
Yes, it's me again. There's one point I forgot to make, and I'm glad that Earl spoke in between anyhow. Most of our politicians in the Caribbean and probably around the world don't understand the reason why the Constitution requires that before any government official enters upon his duties, he must take the oath to protect and defend the Constitution. They don't understand what that means. And just last month, Judge Reyes in the United States explained what it means. Constitutional violations. That means you don't just do something because you think you can do it. You must check whether what you're doing violates the Constitution. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that. Dr. Andre, you want to make any comments on this? You got to unmute your mic.
Yes, well, the Constitution speaks for itself. It clearly indicates that it is the supreme law of the land, and any law which is inconsistent with it is null and void. And it sets out the rights. It talks about the right of liberty, security of the person, right there in Section 1, the very first expression of the rights of democratic or citizens in a democratic state is set out in that Section 1. And when you look at the Riot Act, what you find are provisions which drive a stake, a dagger in the heart of Section 1 of the Constitution. And that is done for a very cynical purpose, a purpose to basically stifle honest and free dissent, a purpose to cow people into submission and to take away their liberties and have them or create a state where you have people who are sheepishly being led to a kind of spiritual or legal slaughter. Because that is what these electoral reforms are supposed to do, or the legislation which strategically leaves out the two of the most important conditions or principles, the major tenets of free and fair elections: campaign finance reform, cleaning the voters list, allowing Tom, Dick, and Harry abroad to vote. But not only that, it enables the continued practice of paying the passages of these folk, giving them free spending money, Let them go back to their country, particularly the US. Many of them get welfare from the state and waiting for another elections to get the same thing over and over. In Greek mythology, there's a story. It's called the myth of Sisyphus. Some poor wretch was condemned by some Greek god for some transgression, for some crime. And you know what his punishment? Rolling a big stone up the hill, not the washing the shime, which one of our poets talked about. Rolling the big stone up a hill only to see the stone run or fall right down, right back to its point, and then to repeat that action with no chances of success. That's what these fellows want. That is the boulder that they have placed in the path of patriotic Dominicans to inflict them with a punishment which will not have any chance of their redemption, a journey without arrival, a kind of overwhelming task which crushes them, crushes their spirit, crushes their life literally. Because as long as you're identified as someone who doesn't support, you're denied promotions, you're denied opportunities, you are denied scholarships, your children are, well, whatever, let's leave that alone. You are denied opportunities to work for a living and to provide for your families. Not even a little ham you can get, while your neighbors get, but look the other way, as if they don't know that you've been stabbed because you've been identified as someone who does not share the same type of political views as the political directorate. That is wrong. It stinks to high heaven. It is egregious. It is capricious. It is reprehensible. And we should not hesitate to call a spade a spade. We should not.
Well, thanks a lot, Irvin. We're run out of time. But Earl, I want to give you a chance to make your final remarks as we close. You need to unmute your mic.
My final remarks is to really extend some sympathy to the people who have gone through this unlawful arrest, who have gone through that adversity. I hope that the government do not break you, because that's their intent, to break you, to break your families, to break your friends, and to put you in your place, quote unquote, and to send a message to others. Don't allow them to succeed. Show your courage, show your commitment, continue to show it, like the people of Salisbury are doing. The Salisbury people were attacked in the most vicious way by regional police, yet they were not afraid to stand up for their rights again on March 20th or March 22nd, when they decided to take action against the unlawful arrest of their former pal rep. So you must show your resolve and urge Dominicans to learn their rights, know your rights, and know when your rights are being violated so that you can take the necessary action. I also want to urge Dominicans, do not feel it's not your business. Do not feel it's not your concern. And many people usually upset because they want to go about their daily business and people are demonstrating. They think people are preventing their vehicles from going where they want to go. And I see because of that, there is no unity. The bus drivers had their own, this other group of people had their own, United Workers' Party had their own, and everybody criticized the other when they have in their own. I think it's time that the people unite. Whether it's the bosses, whether it's the unions, whether it's the churches, whether it's the villages, whether it's the opposition political parties, now is ripe for some grand unity to protect our constitutional rights and to protect our human rights. So that is my call tonight to every Dominican and every organization, every civic-minded organization, every corporation that have civic responsibility to this country. Stand up to ensure that the freedoms that you enjoy in the past, that your children to come will enjoy those same freedoms in our democratic society. Thank you.
Yes, and I dare say that's a very fitting and appropriate call there tonight, Earl. Dr. Andre, you have the final word? Unmute. No.
Yes, let me thank the panelists for their exceptional contribution to the discourse. Obviously, Lambi and Sherwin and the station and yourself, Mr. G, and let me thank your listeners who've diligently listened to us. But what I would like to say, for what it's worth, is, to those persons who've felt the brunt of a dictatorial exercise of state power, what I would like to say on their behalf to the rest of Dominica and at home and abroad, to sympathizers, they should tell them, tears are not enough. Don't feel sorry for me. I stood up. I was propelled by moral rectitude, by my sense of justice, by my sense of what is right, by my desire to make a change in Dominica, by my conviction that it is only myself, obviously enabled by the person upstairs, who can help me make a change. Rather than tears, join in the effort. You don't have to throw stones like the police. You don't have to beat an elderly man senseless. You don't have to cuss people up. You don't have to degrade people by locking them up in a cell for 3 nights when they could have been released the very same day. You don't have to do any of these demonic things. You just stand up on your principles and you be guided by whoever God you serve. Because right is right. And we can all distinguish right from wrong. And just remember the admonition that if you don't stand up for your brother, who is going to stand up for you? When the night or the time draweth nigh. So let's hope that we can learn a lesson. We can see that we are at a juncture in our history where we can make a change. In the words of Michael Jackson, we can decide to make a change, or we can stand on ground, a solid moral ground, on the conviction that no more. We will peacefully continue what we will do and make the world see us in action, that we will not be cowed into submission. As I said, look at the cruel irony of this March 19th. Those who've been charged with rioting never throw stones. They never throw any broomstick. They never flew on a broomstick. They never threw marshmallow. There was no bottles anywhere. Whereas those who assaulted blatantly and egregiously people who carried no arms, no weapons, who tried to steal a tripod of a journalist right there under the glare of media attention, who viciously assaulted an elderly person when his back was turned towards the striker, for God's sakes. These are the persons who showed no restraint and respect for the law. And these are the persons who have been charged to uphold the law. By thy fruits thou shalt know them. So let the world know us by our fruits, standing up within the current constraints and parameters of the law for what should be the law. And let us help those who seek to challenge the system in a legitimate legal way to bring redress and justice to those, quite frankly, whose rights have been trampled upon. And no amount of dimples can hide the fact that the intent of the political directorate is to remain in power indefinitely and to give those pastors who are joined at their hips a little duty-free concession, a little tinted SUV, while they thunder and they clap for joy, as if as if the Almighty God can be fooled. So let us live our faith and let us fight for our rights legally. Thank you very much.
And thank you so much, Dr. Andre. I mean, it's just left for me to thank you and to thank Earl and to thank Ronald Charles and to thank all of these wonderful people who stayed with us throughout the night on Facebook and on YouTube. Thank you so much, guys. We didn't get to read some of your messages that you wrote there, but certainly we're very appreciative of you being with us here tonight. So, Lambi, thanks a lot. Sherwin, thanks a lot. Good night, Irvin. Good night, Earl. And good night, Ronald, wherever you are doing a wonderful work. And take care, everybody. Till next time. Bye for now. Oh, na, 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 na. Oh, na, 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 na.